What's up guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video I'll be going through all the characters in Plants vs Zombies Garden Warfare 2, and there are a lot of characters. If you guys enjoy the video, make sure you like and subscribe with the bell to miss any of our awesome videos, and let's get into the video. Starting off, we have S, which is Elite. These are just probably the best characters in the game, and yeah, go Elite. A, Borderline Elite. These are just characters that I think are really good, but I just don't think they are just enough to be an elite. B, above average. These are the good characters that are they're not special, but they are still really good characters and are fun to play with. C, playable. You could play this character every once in a while, so have a good time. But no one really plays these characters normally, and these just aren't really the best characters in the game. D, below average. These characters are probably the characters that have more flaws than anything, but you can still kind of play them sometimes, maybe have a good time with some of them. Most of these characters aren't really the best characters in the game. F, dog shit. Why would you use this character? There's no reason to use this character, and you're just weird if you use this character, so that's just the whole point of F. So now going into it, we'll start off with the Torchwoods. And the Torchwoods, they have some pretty good abilities. And the Torchwoods have the most health out of any character in the game, with 275 HP, which is a lot. Which is a pretty solid character with some good abilities. It has a good primary, but on the downside it does have some awful mobility, being one of the bigger characters and makes it slower. And it's not really good in today's meta, which is mostly just the faster characters that can just jump around and walk around quickly. So the Torchwood just really doesn't fit in. So for that, I'm probably going to have to put Torchwood in B, because it still is a pretty good class, but it's just not really some of the best. But now that we got Torchwood out of the way, we got the Citrons, and starting off with the base Citron. Good primary. The abilities are all good and they support the primary, which is what we're looking for. It can go into the assault mode, which is the ball, but opposite of that is it is not fast. But the Citron is pretty good in 1v1s, being able to handle its stuff on its own and actually go good against them. So the Citron is a pretty solid character that can do good on its own, and it's pretty quick around the map with some good abilities. But I don't think it's really anything special, and I will put it in B tier, along with the Torchwood. And we got the Frozen Citron, which is pretty similar to the base Citron, but of course it does have the freezing abilities and can freeze zombies. But of course this one does have a downside, and that is that it has no splash damage. And as well, the ice really isn't that good with this character. But I'm still gonna have to put it in D. I still think it's a pretty good character, similar to base, but the ice is always not that bad, and does help out. Now we have the Electro Citron, and this Citron has the worst primary of all of the Citrons, and maybe even in the game. This character just sucks. It is horrible from mid to long range, and not even that, it's not even effective close up. It just kind of sucks from everywhere. And the abilities don't even help the primary at all. They're just kind of useless. So this character is just complete dog shit, and of course that's why I'm going to put it in dog shit. Yeah, this character just sucks and is not good, and doesn't deserve anything higher than dog shit. Next up we have the Iron Citron, and the primary in the Iron Citron is insane. This thing does so much damage. It does 50 damage, and that is just so good. Not only that, it has 250 health. That is a lot of health. So it is just insane how much it does. And honestly, I think this is probably one of the best characters, and has probably one of the best legendary modes. So I'm gonna have to put this character in S tier. It is just such a good character. Good HP, good primary, good abilities. Everything is so good about this character. Then we got the Party Citron next. And it's not as good as the Iron Citron, but it's still really good. And it's kind of similar to the base Citron, but it does have party mode, and that always kind of puts them up a bit. And the party mode on this one isn't really that hard to achieve. It's pretty easy. So Party Citron is a really good character. I'm probably going to put it A. I just don't think it's as good as Iron Citron to go to Elite, but it still is up there, and that's why I have it at A. And to end off the Citrons, we have the Toxic Citron, and this one's actually pretty underrated. The primary is good at taking out characters on the move and larger groups of characters, but it isn't as good in 1v1s compared to the base one, which is pretty good in 1v1s. so it's pretty similar to the base, has the toxic effects, but it isn't as good in 1v1s. So I think that kind of equals out. I'm just gonna put it in B above average. Then we got our next character class, which is the roses. And starting off with, of course, the base rose. And now, I think the rose has probably one of the best primaries out of like all the characters in the game. I used to not really like the rose, but I actually do now. And I think it's probably one of the best characters in the game, especially with the humming effect instead of actually being accurate. Which I think is really cool how they made that. And I think that this character is probably one of the most dominant plants mid to long range. And that's pretty good as well. And like I said before, they don't really rely on accuracy, but how well you understand the homing mechanic. Like you, of course, don't really have to be accurate, but you know how that. But you have to know how like the homing works to actually use this character. You also need to know when you use your abilities, so understanding the rose is probably the key part of being able to use the rose. But with that, I'm gonna have to put this rose in A. It's just a very good rose, able to do good on its own. And I definitely like the rose a lot. Following that up, we have the druid rose. And this is a little slower projectile speed, but it does fire faster and it does have the toxic effect. So it's basically like a normal rose with a faster fire rate and the toxic effect, which is just, a better rose. And I'm gonna have to put that right next to it at A. Next up, the fire rose. And this one actually has the charge shots, and I don't think the charge shots are really that special. There's nothing really good about them. And the shots after the fire charge shot are not really that special. They're pretty underwhelming as well. It does, of course, have the fire effects, being able to do some extra damage if you hit someone. And it is solid, but probably one of the worst roses there are. And I'm probably going to have to put this at B tier. So I don't think it's as good as the normal rose, and I'd probably go the normal rose over this. Now we got the frost rose, and this frost rose is actually a pretty solid character. But I think people kind of give this character a little too much crap. I think it's actually a really good character, and it deserves to be treated a little better. I can kind of see why if you do. But the freeze effect is pretty effective, and I like the freeze effect on this rose. But again, just like the fire rose, the shots after the charge shot are again underwhelming. That's obviously pretty disappointing. And me, I'm not really a big fan of the charge shots. So fire rose and frost rose aren't really going to be as high, but I'm trying to make this list as least biased as I can. But, I'm still going to have some. And because I don't know really how the other side feels. If you do like the charge shots, you might have a different opinion than me. But I'm going to have to put this character right next to fire rose. Both have the charge shots, and I'm not really a big fan of that. Now we get the neck rose. And I know I said I didn't like the charge shots, but for this one I'd make an exception. Because the charge shot on this one is actually like effective and works well. So with this one, you are able to jinx a zombie, and what that does is that makes the zombie so vulnerable that when you jinx a zombie, anyone on your team will do twice as much damage as normal. Not just you, but your whole team. And that is really good. So the charge on this one is just such a good one, and is able to just take out groups of zombies so good. So I'm gonna have to put this one at the S tier, because it's a really good character. To finish off the roses, we have the party rose. Pretty similar to the normal rose, most party characters are, but it does have the party mode, and that always kind of makes it a little better. But I think it's still a really good one, but I don't think it's as good as neck rose, so I'm going to put it in A. I just don't think it deserves to be any higher. Then we got the corns, and the corns are a really good class. The corns are probably very dominant, especially in today's meta. Like the corns just excel in everything. And I think that the corn probably has one of the top 2 ability sets in the whole game. Like the corn has a really good ability set. And not even just a ability set, it also has a pretty insane primary that does a lot of damage and is really good close up. And I'm just gonna even have to put the base corn at S tier. Like this character is just so good. And it is just insane how much damage it does, especially with its ability set being top 2. Next is probably the worst corn there is, and that's going to be the barbecue corn. Now, it still has 150 health, which is good. I know a lot of people actually kind of hate this character, but I kind of think it's not that bad. It still has one of the best abilities, and the primary is a little underrated with the fire damage. And the fire damage complements the high fire rate, being able to have that very high fire rate, and then the fire damage after is really good. And people kind of put this character at either like D, or they have it high up at A. And I'm probably going to put it high up at A. I really like this character, and I think it's actually pretty good, but I know some people don't. And it's definitely probably the worst corn there is. But I still think it's pretty good. So the next character we have is going to be the Mob Cob. And maybe you could put this one in S tier, but I don't think I'm going to. I think I'll probably put Mob Cob, probably A. But I don't really like the fire rate this character has. And there are better corns to choose from. Like maybe just the base corn you probably choose from be better. But it does have a slight downgrade than base corn. And that's why I just don't have it at S tier. Pops corn is another really good corn. But I feel like this one's more mid-range, but it still has a good primary. All corns have a good primary. I want to put this one probably at A with the other corns. Yeah, all the corns rank pretty high in my opinion. Then we got Party Corn and Commando Corn. Now I'm going to probably be ranking these two together because I do think they're pretty similar. Now Party Corn is 5 kills for the party mode, which is really not too hard with a corn, especially with its abilities. Make it pretty easy. So getting the party mode with the Party Corn is not too hard. I don't have to put Party Corn at S tier. And same with Commando Corn. Both of these characters have splash damage, and they're just really good corns. And that will end off our corns, which now moves on to the Ps. And now we got all the P shooters, and starting off with, of course, the base P. And the P shooters are all really good, especially the base P itself. This character has some really great mobility. The primary is a bit average, it's not that bad, does some good damage. And the base P is still, it's a good character. Nothing special about it, it's just pretty basic. So I'm probably gonna have to put it at B tier, but I still think it's a really good character. Now I kinda think that the Fire P, Ice P, and Toxic P are all pretty similar. So we'll just kinda be ranking them right here. They're all just kind of small upgrades from the base, but they're only really upgrades just being like their different abilities like Fire, Ice, and Toxic. So I'll just be ranking them right at B right next to them. Moving on, we have Commando P. And Commando P I think is probably one of the more worst Ps. It has some poor accuracy and range, and it's not that very versatile for a P shooter. So I'm going to have to put Commando P at just C, playable, because obviously you can still play with this one, but I don't think it's as good compared to the other ones. Agent P, I'm pretty sure you guys all know where this one's going. Definitely going to go S tier. Agent P is probably one of the top 5 characters in the game. It is such a good character. And the critical hits reward for 2 times the damage that it normally hit. And that is a lot of damage. So this character does so much damage. It has a high DPS. And one of the best if you have good aim. So if you obviously like are pretty accurate, I definitely recommend Agent P. If you hit a lot of headshots, you'll do so good as this character. Next up we have Law P. And Law P I think is like more of like a downgrade from Agent P. It only has 6 shots in its clip, which isn't really that bad because of the reload time, which is actually really quick. And reload upgrades make it barely noticeable. Now, I'm not really that dominant with this character, and I think Agent P is just better, but it still is a really good character. And just for the slight downgrade, I'm probably going to put it at A, but it's a really good character, fast reload, and a fast firing rate. And Plasma P, I think, is probably going to be worse than even Law P, but its charge shots are deadly and do a lot of damage. And Plasma P is pretty easy to use. This character is not too hard, anyone can do good with this character. And that's a pretty good thing, that is always good to see. So I'm planning to put Plasma P right behind Agent P, right behind Law P. I still think it's a really good character. Now we got Rock P. And I don't think this character is that good. I'm probably going to have to put it at D. And the reason because of this is because P shooters rely on mobility. So getting a speed reduction is not the thing you want. I mean, yeah, you do get health, but I just don't think it's really worth it. I mean, the splash damage for this character is good, and you definitely could play with this character, but I just think like the health upgrade is not worth it, and they're just, all the other P shooters are just so much better than this one. We got Electro P, And this is definitely pretty obvious. S tier, like, come on, we all knew that. But this probably may honestly just be like the best character in the game with the best primary in the game. And it is just such a fast character with the charge shots being absolutely insane. This just definitely the #1 character in the game. So starting off with the base Sunflower. And the primary and the base Sunflower is just, it's pretty meh. There's nothing really good about this. Yeah, none of the Sunflowers should really be too high on the list just because most of them are just kind of the same. And they're not really that good. But, of course, Sunflowers are support characters, and they are a really good support. But they aren't good in 1v1s. But I don't really think that's more of an issue. Because if you are using a Sunflower, you probably will be next to your team most of the time. So I don't see why that would be an issue at all. And its mobility is pretty good, and it moves around pretty quick, but it's not bad. And I'm just probably going to put just the base Sunflower, probably at just C, playable. Yeah, I don't, like, it's still a good character, but there's nothing special to it. We got the Fire Flower, and the fire effect is definitely better than just the base P, but I don't think it's not like enough to put it higher for me on the list. I don't think it put it in B tier, but the fire effect is still good. I mean, you really could put it higher if you wanted to. I could see why you would. I still think it's kind of the same as the normal Sunflower. That's why I'm just going to put it right next to it. Now we see Power Flower, and the electric is good at taking out groups. Now we don't really see that in many of the other Sunflowers. But again, it's not that much of an upgrade, besides just having that electric ability. So of course, I'm just going to put it next to C. These Sunflowers, they mostly range at the C range. None of these were really that good. Shadow Flower does have a higher DPS, and this one will probably go higher as well. I'll probably have to put it at B. And of course, it could be at C tier. I think all the Sunflowers could be. But just to kind of make it a little more fair, I'll put this one just a little bit higher, because it does have a higher DPS. And the Mystic Sunflower, and the charge in this one is deadly. Like, this thing does so much damage with like a max of like almost 70. And that's just absolutely, like, that's crazy. I think it's just slightly above average. You definitely could put it at C, but I think with that charge shot, it deserves to be at B. And it has a good reason to be. We have an armored character, which is Metal Pedal. And I don't think the reduction really matters that much for the speed, because Sunflowers, they don't really move around that much. They kind of just sit by the team. So I don't think the reduction is that much. And I actually kind of would prefer the 50 health over the speed, because Sunflower would probably be taking more hits, especially kind of being like out in the open or running to like a teammate. So I think that the extra health is actually pretty good for this one. And you know, I might actually put this one at B, because I actually kind of think that the health upgrade is actually pretty helpful for a Sunflower. Most characters, they don't really like the health upgrades, but I could kind of see it being more beneficial for a Sunflower. Then we got my personal favorite Sunflower, the Sun Pharaoh, but I will not be any bias with this. But I think that this one's actually kind of pretty underrated. I do not see this one a lot, and I think it's actually really good. That's why it's probably my favorite. I really like the burst effect it has, and I think that burst can be really deadly sometimes. And I usually like the burst primaries on characters. I think they're kind of just better to use. And they can be really bad sometimes. Like if you hit 3 headshots in a row, it is insane. So I'm gonna have to put the Sun Pharaoh at B, because I really like the burst effects, and it is just a really good Sunflower. Now we get the worst Sunflower, which is going to be Alien Flower. And when I say worst flower, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It's not that bad. But it does have the lowest DPS out of all the flowers. But this one is the best from range. But the primary also isn't that good. So it does have a lot of pros and cons to it. And I'm probably just going to have to put it at C, because they all kind of even out for me. Vampire Flower, just like the base. But I don't think the Vampire is worth the health, damage, and the clip size. So I'm just going to have to put it at C. But it's still a really good one, especially if you do like the vampire effects. And to end off, we have the Stuffy Flower. And this is probably the top 2 Sunflower, depending on what your favorite one is. But I think that the Sun Drop just makes her the best like flower for support. And she does have the highest DPS out of the flowers. So this is just statistically probably the best Sunflower there is. And I'll have to put this one at B. So now we finished sunflowers, you go on to the chompers. So base chomper, and guys, do not expect these chompers to be high on the list. Most of these chompers will be pretty low on the list. And when I say low, I mean probably F and D, because they just aren't really good anymore. And with the chompers, I think there's just a skill limit you could go to, because it doesn't require any aim. So like once you like are pretty good at chomping people, there's not much higher you can go. Like, yeah, you can chomp someone, that's it. But like, what else are you gonna do? There's nothing else you can do. You can burrow underground, that's it. You can walk behind someone and eat them, that's it. So I think that the base chomper just has pretty much a skill limit to it. It can be broken sometimes, but it also is counterable. And like I said before, no aim equals no skill. Not to mention that though, if a chomper comes inside like a group, it is dead. If it like swallows a zombie in the middle of a group, it is gonna be just like, it's so dumb because it has that delay. So I think the chomper is just not even a good class. Definitely gonna go dog shit. Like, this just has so many issues. Then we got fire chomper, and I personally don't really like the sprays. But even if you guys do like the sprays, I just don't even think this is like really good chomper. Of course, being fire, it does have the fire effects, but not everyone does, and there's nothing special. I don't really like the sprays. And I think that the D tier is probably going to be the max like tier for any chompers. I don't see them going higher. I do kind of prefer the faster chomper for less health. I think that the being faster kind of helps the sneakier playstyle, and I think that is how you're supposed to play a chomper. So being faster definitely kind of supports that. And I think that the speed boost just kind of puts it above the base chomper. And I will put this one in D, right next to the rock B, but that doesn't mean I still like the chompers. We got probably one of the more underrated chompers, and this can be the power chomper. Like I said, pretty underrated. And this one is much better at taking out groups compared to the other chompers who aren't. And I think this is probably going to be the best spray. I know I said I didn't like the sprays, but I think this one's good, and I'm going to have to put it at D. And Count Chompula, I used to like this one, but now I don't. It just really isn't that good of a sunflower anymore. It's not really impressive. And looking at the stats, they just aren't good. They're not impressive at all. And on paper, this character just isn't good at all. And the vampire effect just does not make up for the flaws of a chomper. So I went to put Count Chompula, dog shit. Not a good one. I think I used to like this one, but I don't anymore. Now Toxic Chomper is pretty similar to the Fire Chomper. There's nothing really different about them except obviously the toxic effect. So right next to this one. Then we got the Armor Chomper, and I'm not a fan of the speed boost. Now sometimes I do like the armor characters, and I think that maybe the armor might be a little helpful for a chomper because it does need to get close up. But I also think that taking away the speed really isn't that good of a trade. So although the health is helpful, I do not like the speed, so they don't really mean that much to me. It does have a pretty powerful bite that can deal up to 15 damage. But I do kind of like the armor characters, so I think they can be helpful. Now we got the worst spray chomper, and that's Chomp Theme. This has the second lowest health of all the chompers, and the health regeneration system that it has does not make up for it. So Chomp Theme has a horrible spray, no health, and this is just, it's dog shit. Definitely going right next to the dog shit, and most chompers will be dog shit. And now this one's pretty different from all the other ones. It's a Yeti chomper, and this one actually has range. So like I said, that's different than the others, because all the chompers you have to actually like get up close, but this one you can actually shoot people, and I think that's pretty cool. It's unique. I definitely like how they switched it up instead of having them all be biting. That would have got really like repetitive. I'm gonna have to put this one at D. I really like what they did with this one, and I think it's interesting seeing out actually shooting with a chomper. We have the Disco Chomper, and this is basically just the base chomper but with party mode. That's usually how all party mode are, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I just think that it's not really that good, and the party mode does take more effort to get with this one, so this one is just gonna go F tier for me. And the Unicorn and Twilight, I'll be ranking them together. And the reason for that is because they actually can warp instead of burrowing. And I actually kind of like the warps better than the burrows. So I will be ranking these at D. And they are pretty quick. The Twilight Chomper moving pretty fast for a Chomper. That's also another plus. And the Twilight Chomper is probably my go-to Chomper. I usually prefer that one when I actually play the Chompers. So we have the last class to finish off the plants, and that will be the Cactus. In the base Cactus, I really like the Cactus. This is probably one of my favorite classes. And the primary on the Cactus are pretty good. They do a lot of damage, and if you're accurate, these can be really deadly. But these Cactus are really slow and have bad mobility, and they honestly probably have like one of the worst ability sets in the whole game. And you know, they have a good primary, but a lot of downsides to them. So this character just relies on his primary. And this really goes for all cacti, but I really won't be ranking them all together right now. But I have to put the base Cactus probably at C, because it is a really good character and I really like it. But I just don't really think it deserves to be that high because it doesn't have any redeeming factors. So the fire, ice, and power all pretty similar. They're just kind of basically the base Cactus but with a small upgrade. So I'll be ranking them all together at C, because it's just basically the same thing and there's nothing really special about it. And future Cactus, and this is a really good Cactus. Like, I really like this Cactus a lot. It has a charge shot, plus the primaries are really good. And this primary has more potential than any other Cactus, doing a lot of damage. And the lack of speed will kind of bring it down a tier, but I will put it at B. But without that speed, if that speed wasn't even a thing, this character would probably be A. It's a really good one. I like the Cactus a lot. And the Bandit I feel is pretty underrated. The primary on this one's pretty underrated. But I think the reason that no one really uses it is because it does have Bloom. And I'm not a big fan of any characters with Bloom besides maybe like the Foot Soldier and the Imp. But with these type of characters, especially the Cactus, I prefer just having my shots going straight. So I will put the Bandit at C. We got the Camo Cactus. And the primary on this one is actually really good, doing 66 critical damage. And that is a lot of damage. This one does take more skill out of all the Cactus, so you will have to have better aim. But if you do have good aim with this Cactus, you could be really good, and you could do a lot of damage with this one. So I'm probably going to have to put it at B. I do think it's above average, but again, like I said, the Cactus are slow, and that's definitely going to keep bringing it down and affecting it a lot. So I always take that into consideration. Then we got the armored one of the cacti, which is a Jade Cactus. So more health, less speed, nothing really special. Probably going to go C. We get the Zen Cactus, and this really just isn't as good as Future or Camo, but it still is a good Cactus. I just don't think I'd have it at B, and I'm just gonna go C. Doesn't deserve to go up by them. They're on their own kind of rank up there. But we got the Petrified Cactus now, and this one is definitely just gonna go S tier. Like, this is such a good Cactus, and the reason it is because it has self detonation. And that's just what makes it so good. Like, being able to just time your shots and just detonate it whenever you want is just such a good ability to have. And those self-detonation definitely makes it a more explosive character. So I think the Petrified Cactus is definitely going to be the best Cactus there is. So now we're going on to the zombies, and starting off, we have Hover Goat 3000. And this is probably going to be one of the best support characters we have in the game. Now the abilities are good, but not great compared to Corn. Corn just has probably one of the best abilities in the game, hands down. So Hover Goat 3000, it's nothing really special, but it is a really good support character. So we'll kind of put it at B, just above average. So now we get the Imp characters, and now the Imp is pretty interesting because I think this is a really good class. It does have 75 HP, but to make up for that, it is a tiny hitbox and it's pretty hard to hit. So I think that just kind of makes up for the 75 HP. It has great mobility with it being able to do the double jump, and I really like the double jump. I find that really fun to use. And the Imp, I think, probably has some of the best abilities alongside with the Corn. Especially with that Z-Mech, that thing is really good. So I'm gonna have to put just the base Imp probably at A, because it is a really good character and definitely deserves to be up there. Now we see Lil Drake, and this is the Fire Imp, so it does have the fire damage. slightly less bait impact damage, and does have some slower projectile speed, but it is pretty similar to the base imp, just with the fire damage, so I will come put it right next to it at A. We have the Pylon imp, and this is probably going to be the worst imp, with the worst mech. But like I said before, that does not mean that this is a bad character, it still is a good character. And the mech is obviously still really good, because all the mechs are good. And I think the Pylon imp is still a really good imp. Probably the worst one, but like I said, that does not mean it's bad, and I will put it at A. So the Shrimp imp. Now the primaries are like the base imp, but have less recoil, which is not really that much, and that's basically really the only thing different about this one. And you know, just A. I don't think that is anything to put it any higher, just a little recoil change. But obviously still a really good character. So the party imp, obviously all the party characters are just like the base character, but with party mode. So party imp, base imp, plus party mode. And that's still really good. Like, there's nothing wrong with having that party mode. Now, I don't want to put it in the S tier with the other characters, because I feel like it's just not as good. But this still is a really good character. And I just don't know. Like, I think it could probably go in S, but I think I'll just leave it at A for right now. We have the little Scallywag imp. And now I like the slower fire rate. It's more easy to control. And this imp has a very good mech. Probably one of the best mechs out of all of them. I'm not really sure that it is still the Z7 imp that might have a better mech. But this is a really good mech, and I really like this one. But not only that, it only takes 3 kills to get the legendary mode with this one. And that's nothing. Like, that is very easy. So I think that this Scallywag imp is probably going to go S tier elite. It is a really good character. And to finish off the imps, we have the Z7 imp. And this, I think, is probably going to be honestly better than the Scallywag, so that means it's going straight up to S. And this just has probably one of the best primaries, maybe even in the whole game. I'm not sure about how this one goes against the Corn. And the DPS on this character is really good. But this is just an overall a really good character. And all the imps are really good, with some of the best abilities, and the mechs, of course, the mechs. But all the imps are good. None that even go lower than A, and that's just insane for a character. So moving on, we see Super Brains, just base Super Brains. And Super Brains, come on, it's pretty easy. It's going straight up to S, there's no doubt about it. Super Brains is very dominant up close, and has fast hits, and does a lot of damage. Not only that, it has 200 HP. And that is a lot of HP, like, oh my gosh, wow. It also has some good speed, being able to get around pretty quick with the kicks. The Super Brains are just a complete powerhouse. It's able to take in a bunch of hits. And not only that, it can also throw out really hard hitting hits, which just makes the Super Brains so good. And the kick makes up for the speed. Being able to have that kick is very helpful, and it helps you get into fights and out of fights as well. And it's just very strong close up, of course, because obviously it does punch. So I think that the Super Brains base Super Brains is some really good character and definitely deserves to go S. We see Cosmic Super Brains, and some people, they like Cosmic Super Brains, like they either really like it or don't. And I think it's still Super Brains, but it's obviously, that means it's still good. And the Charge Pump is underrated. I think that it's still like a really good ability. But the punch really doesn't do good with characters that have more HP. It might do good maybe against like a pea shooter, but against a Torchwood, it's not going to do that good. So I will put Cosmic Brains at A. It's still a Super Brains, which means it's still good. And it's good with characters mid to low health, but anything above that is not good. Now we got the E-Brains, and this is probably the worst Super Brains there is. Of course, like I said before, it doesn't mean it's bad, but it is just the worst one. And this one is just weaker in 1v1s. It doesn't do as good. It can excel in some certain situations, but that's just certain situations, and who knows how many times you can get in those. And the Electric can help with groups. By the end of the day, it's still a Super Brains, so it's definitely gonna go A tier. And Toxic Brains, this one's going straight up to S. Like, come on, we all know that. And it does have the Toxic Overload, and the reason that is so good is because it has punches and not kills. So you only have to punch people, and the punches aren't even that much. Like, it's not even a bunch of punches. And it has one of the best legendary modes. and the legendary is easy to get. So that is why this is just such a good Super Brains, and it's going straight up to S. Party Brains as well, going straight up to S. All the Super Brains are just so good. It's not as good as Toxic, but the party mode is the reason it's this high, and it's still a really good character. And to finish off the Super Brains, we have the Breakfast Brains. And I think that's probably going to be like one of the bottom 3 supers, which means it's like out of all the Super Brains, it'd probably be like the last 3. The primary is good, but base I feel is just better, so I will put it at A. And I don't know, it's pretty similar to base. When we finish the Super Brains, we have the Pirates. So starting off, Captain Deadbird, base pirate. I think that both primaries this one has are really good, with the Spyglass shot and the other one, which is really good. The abilities aren't really that special, but they're not bad. Of course, not special like I already said. But still is a really solid character, and I will put it at B, because I do think all the pirates are really good. And now we see Captain Cannon. I think Captain Cannon is probably going to be the top 3 characters in the game. This character, of course, has self-detonation, and that's always a big plus. Like, just like the Petrified Cactus, self-detonation is just like that's all you really want. So Captain Cannon does have that, makes him a more explosive character. And I think that, of course, already going elite. No doubt about it. Captain Flame is next. He does less damage in the base one, and it does have a damage drop off. And the fire damage, I just don't think is worth the damage drop off. So I'm gonna have to put Captain Flame and see. I just don't think it's really worth the fire damage. So Captain Sharkbite, I feel is pretty underrated. And it is pretty close up, and does have better zoom. It does more damage, but it has a slower rate. So I think that the Captain Sharkbite is pretty good and pretty underrated. But it's pretty nothing special. I'm just gonna have to put a B next to the base one. We got Captain Partyman, another pretty basic one. Like I always say, it's just the base plus party mode. That's all Captain Partyman is. I do like his party mode, and there's a bit of an upgrade, but it's nothing much. So we'll just go and B right next to the normal. To finish out the pirates, we have Captain Squawk. And I think that's probably the best pirate if you do the long range. So if you kind of sit in the back doing more like a sniper, then I say definitely go Captain Squawk. But it really isn't that effective, and it still is not a bad character, so I will just put it in playable. So that is it for the pirates, and now we have the Foot Soldier. And base Foot Soldier is a really good character, actually. I think that the Foot Soldier is probably one of the most versatile characters in the game. And it can be pretty much a threat at all ranges, from far distance, mid, and close up, which makes them probably some of the best character classes in the game. And I'm going to have to put the base one at B tier, because it is actually really good, and is above average. So Super Commando, I feel, is probably going to be the best soldier there is. It does have a burst as a primary, and like I said before, I do like the burst. So Super Commando, I think, is probably going to be the best one. It has a high DPS, and doesn't really compare to any of the S tier characters, which is why I wouldn't put him up there, but I will put him up at by A. So we have the Arctic Trooper now, and this is actually a really good ice character. Like, this one is able to freeze plants very fast, and I think it's like only like 15 shots, which is like really nothing with their fire rate. And I think that actually makes fights really unfair. So 1v1 against this character basically means you're gonna freeze. So the Arctic Trooper is really good. And I'm going to put this one at A. Again, like I said before, I just don't think it's enough to go in S tier, but it doesn't mean it's bad. Then going on to probably one of the more worst side, we have General Supremo. His stats just aren't really that impressive, and on paper he's just not really that good. And he's the least accurate and has more bloom to him. He's just probably going to go C tier for me. Now yeah, it's really downsides, but you could play as him. Then we have the Camo Ranger. And this one has probably the best range and zoom, with a fast fire rate and good damage output. And that's actually really good. This character is a really good camo. This character is a really good foot soldier that does a lot. And I really like this one. I'm probably gonna have to put him at A. He maybe could go up to S, but I don't know. I just don't think he is. I'm probably just gonna put him at the A. So now we have the tank, and this one is not really versatile. It can be powerful in certain situations, but I don't really like characters that are just in certain situations. I would rather have them be good all around. But I will have this one be in B, because of course it's not bad. It's nothing special. So I do like this character, and I will just have him kind of lower though. So then we have Sky Trooper, and this is pretty similar to Base Soldier. It just maybe fires a little faster, and that's it. So I will just put it at above average. There's nothing special about this one. So now we have Centurion, and the primary on this one really isn't impressive. I think that camo is definitely better than this one. It just isn't special, so I'm just gonna have to put it at C with the General Supremo. It's just nothing really good. So now we have the Park Ranger, and this one has a large damage radius, but it does rely on certain situations. Again, I don't like that. I just prefer one situation and it's good. But this character is really good and can take on groups. And I think I want to put this one at B. I don't know. I feel like it could go. I'm gonna have to put it at A. It could be B tier as well if you want to. But I really like this character. I'm just gonna have to put him in at A. So to finish off, we have the Scuba Soldier. The primary is an improvement from tanks, so it's like a better tanks. It has more shots and a fire faster rate. So I think that this one is probably the top 5 soldier. And I'm gonna have to put this one at A. It's a really good soldier and a pretty solid one. So that is it for the foot soldiers, and now we move on to the scientist. So starting off with the base scientist, it has a high damage output, but that you do have to be pretty close up to actually do damage. This character does not do range, and it does have a slow fire rate. This one is pretty dominant up close. Again, like I said, poor range, and it only has 100 health, which we think about it, being up close is not good at all for 100 health, because it makes you pretty vulnerable. And I want to put the scientist just at B. It's not really that good. And most of these scientists do rank at B with just being similar and nothing really new about them. So all these scientists are just at B. Nothing special. They're just basically the same as base. But we do stop at the astronaut scientist, because he actually has an automatic gun instead of like a shotgun almost, which actually gives his character range. So in my opinion, this is probably going to be like the best scientist out of all of them, with a little damage drop off. And like I said, it has range, so that means it's actually able to help its teammates from any range, not just close range, and actually like still do damage. So I think that the astronaut is probably like they're going to be the best scientist, and I will have to put it in A, because it is actually really good, and I like how it can actually help from range. And we have computer scientist, and this one actually is the crunch mode, and it's similar to the marine, and it does have legendary mode as well, which is a really good legendary mode. So it's probably going to be like probably one of the best scientists there are, especially with the crunch mode and its legendary mode as well. Pretty similar to the marine one, but it's actually really good, and I think it's just a better version. And to finish off the scientist, we have the zoologist, and it's pretty good close up. It does not have range though, but it's just like all the other scientists, none of them have range. So the zoologist is another pretty basic one, just kind of similar to the base. So that will lead us on to the engineer class now. And today, the engineer just is kind of a strange class. It doesn't fit in with today's meta, especially with the fast, like I said before, and jumping around. So the engineer is more of a slow, and it was only really like built like a mage just to kind of counter the choppers, and the choppers aren't really used, so the engineer isn't really used. The engineer is only really used just for building the teleporters and turret takeover. Otherwise, no one cares about this. It doesn't stand out. It does have a solid ability, but it's just not good. It doesn't fit in today. I'm just going to put the base chomper at playable, because yeah, you could obviously still play with this one, but I just don't see why you would. We have the welder, which is basically, it's a fire one, so it does have the fire effect, but it does less damage. I mean, it could make up for that with the fire effect, but I'm just going to have to put it at playable again, because it is just an engineer in the end of the day, and no one uses the engineers. Now we have electrician, and it's pretty similar to base. It has less damage, but it does have an electric effect, which I think is actually really good. I don't mind the electric effects, but again, it's nothing special. They're all just engineers, and no one cares about the engineers. Like, there's nothing good about them. They have no really redeeming factor that puts them higher in the list. Now we probably have one of the better engineers, which is going to be the mechanic. This probably is the best primary out of all the engineers, with a good DPS and automatic fire rate. So the engineer, so the mechanic is probably going to be the best engineer. I'm going to put this one at B tier. I can actually kind of see why you might use this one. Another good one is going to be the landscaper. And I think the fire rate is just like an improvement compared to the base one. So this one is also another really good one. And I'm going to put it at B tier. So we have the sanitation engineer. And this one does actually pretty good damage. It does have a toxic effect, which is kind of weird because it isn't actually, I don't think, classified as a toxic character. And it really isn't that good of an upgrade from the base engineer, which is why I'm just going to put it at the same tier of the base engineer. Because I just don't really like, it's nothing different. Another good engineer is going to be the painter. And this is actually pretty good for a range one for accurate players. Because if you're actually pretty accurate, painter would probably be one of the better engineers for you. It has one of the largest damage outputs for the engineers. And it's actually a pretty solid engineer. I'm going to have to put this one at B tier. Because it actually is like one of the better ones. But then we go to the plumber, which isn't as good. And the splash damage is kind of good for new players, but once you start getting better and hit, you start actually hitting the players, you will kind of want to switch over to an engineer that does more damage. But for the newer players, I would definitely recommend the plumber. Once you start getting better at the game and actually start hitting your shots, switch to a different engineer, and that's even if you want to stick to the engineer. Now we have Goatboyyyy, and this one is actually really dominant up close. It's pretty like the scientist, where it does not have any range, but once you get up close, it is really deadly. It has 25 more HP, and the abilities actually support him really well. He has the jackhammer so he can get up close to people, and he has the sonic grenade which is able to stun them, allowing him to actually go around and actually do damage. So this is actually a really solid engineer who has some good abilities. And I want to put this one at B. This is a really good engineer, and I can see why people might actually use this one. We have AC Parry, and this is another one with a good splash, but the mechanic is just a better version of him. And he does have the freeze effect, but that's not really that good. And we'll put him at C playable. Yeah, I don't think he's really that good. So now the last class is the All-Stars. So we have the base All-Star. And the All-Star is a good ability set, and it has 200 HP, another one with a lot of HP, a good primary, and it's not really that mobile, but it's a pretty solid character. I will have to put him at B, because this is a really good character. I can see why you use that. So we have Cricket and Goalie. And the Ice and Fire are good. And they are better than the base, but they aren't really that much better. And they will just go right next to him. Now the Baseball Star, in my opinion, is pretty underrated. It has the third highest DPS for all the All-Stars. And it's probably going to be the most accurate out of all of them as well. So this is a really good one. But I'm probably going to have to put him, he's probably still at B. But he is pretty underrated. So now we have the Hockey, and he probably has one of the highest DPSs in the whole game, which is really good. But he does have Hide Bloom. But he does have Bad Bloom, and he does overheat pretty fast. But I think it kind of evens out, and I will kind of put him at B tier. Because again, at the end of the day, he is just kind of a normal All-Star. Now we have the Rugby Star. And this one is actually another underrated one, who has a large damage output, can do splash damage, but its primary is pretty inconsistent and doesn't really do that much. But it is probably one of the better All-Stars. But with the primary, I kind of like the consistent ones better, but it's still a really good one, and I will put it at B tier. The Wrestling All-Star, in my opinion, is going to be one of the more worse ones. It is worse than Rugby. It has no splash damage. It does actually less damage, and the primary just isn't good. So this is not a good one, and I'm probably gonna have to put it at C because it is still playable, but it's just not good. I wouldn't use it. Then we have the Golf Star, and this is probably gonna be the best All-Star because of its range. It has a super high DPS as well. It has the highest accuracy, not good mobility, and All-Stars don't really dominate that much. But this one is really good. And I'm probably gonna have to put it at A. I think it's a big step up from the other ones and just has a lot more like pros. Moto X is another one of the more worst All-Stars, which is primary is pretty bad. and has a low DPS, takes away your abilities, so if you're like, it'll take away a plant's abilities and it can't use them, which is pretty cool. But it's almost like a support character, because it just doesn't really do that much. So Moto X just isn't really a good all-star. I'm gonna have to put this one at C tier. And now the last one, the Tennis Star. Now the Tennis Star, good way to end off. It's pretty good. This primary is pretty good. And best all-star on the move in my opinion, so it does move pretty fast and is pretty good. But I have to put this one at B tier, pretty average as well. There's nothing too special about it. But that is my list. If you guys agreed with anything, but that is my list. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys in the next video.